Hello everybody, James here. Now if you can hear clanging and banging, you shouldn't be able to, but just so you know, I've got my garage being done, I've got my garden being dug out, I've got my porch being built, and I've got a garden wall being built. It's 4 sets of tradesmen outside my house at the same time, and I'm having to sort of deal with everything at the same time and coordinate, which is probably why I've not been able to have as much time as I normally would doing little videos like this. And there has been a couple of stories out there the last few days that I am going to do videos on, and this is what I'm talking about today. The Dave Meltzer, Tony Khan, Rusev dynamic. Now, you might be wondering, well, why are you talking about that? Well, it's kind of like, the reason it seems is because Meltzer seems to be doing hit piece after hit piece on Rusev. I'm going to give you some quotes in a second, but first off, we're going to go to this write-up by 411 Mania. The Wrestling Insider noted how the Bulgarian brute, who was allegedly opposed to losing matches when he was in AEW, had already suffered double the number of defeats he's faced during his 5-year stint with the Jacksonville-based company. Dave Meltzer also claimed that Tony Khan overpaid the former Miro, given that the current WWE superstar wrestled just 36 matches in All Elite Wrestling during his 5-year stay, as opposed to the 22, it says 22, it's actually 25 matches he has had since his return to WWE. Apparently Aleister Black is also the same. Aleister Black also seems to be someone else that Meltzer's complaining about, as well as Ray Phoenix, which I'm going to bring up in a second. But anyway, Dave Meltzer also continually talks about Rusev not being over on his radio shows. Every single time Rusev's name is brought up, Dave Meltzer, he's not over. No one's cheering for him. No one's making any noise. Well, do you know what? You can actually say that for quite a lot of people with the reaction he's getting. In fairness, in WWE Raw, when he was out for that I think it was the triple threat match, they, during his intro, were showing like Ice Cube's son in the crowd and, you know, some sports players and whatnot. And I didn't realise at the time they were playing like just like interstitial background music kind of thing. And then it turned to Rusev's music, and he was already at the front where the mats are, where the ring is. So they're not doing him any favours, WWE, in that sense. But that's not the point. Every single time that Rusev's name comes up, Dave Meltzer always makes a point of saying he's not over and etc. Just whatever it is, it might be. I'm pretty sure he doesn't really seem to do this with any other wrestlers except for Ray Phoenix. And that's interesting because Ray Phoenix also apparently ran afoul of Tony Khan when he and Penta both declared that they wanted to go to WWE when their contracts ran out. And Tony Khan, for Ray Phoenix only, enacted the injury clause and basically kept Ray Phoenix at home paid, for whatever reason, for an extra 6 months or so when Penta was doing his stuff on WWE Raw and continues to do so. In fact, in the same match with Rusev, at least Phoenix still got paid, so you can't feel too sorry for him. But anyway, the point is this. This is one of Dave Meltzer's more subtle pro-AEW tactics that he drives home every single week. It's not as obvious as saying, let's say, discussing NXT's ratings and Dynamite's ratings or Collision's ratings or whatever it might be every single week. He will give, and this is on social media, he will give the NXT number and say, well, if it's a bit low, we'll say, well, it's a tough week because baseball was on or something. Whereas if AEW Dynamite had below par ratings, he will give every excuse under the book for it between every single sport that was on, including women's basketball or baseball, whatever it might be, or college football. And then he'll also talk about Fox News was on. Well, Fox News is on every single night. Even if there is no major news, he will cite Fox News as a big problem. Not for WWE stuff, but for AEW. And then last week, I believe he cited a random film on a cable station called Freeform, which I'm not based in the US, fine. I've never heard of that channel before, and I bet a lot of people haven't either, or only cursory mentions or hearings of. And you know, the sun was shining, and there was 2-for-1 drinks at TGI Fridays. Anything basically to mitigate the circumstances. And this is coming from somebody who used to be in touch with Paul Bosch, who would name all these excuses and then tell him that there are no excuses. You just put on a bad show, or a show that wasn't interesting to the vast majority of people you hope to reach. Anyway, it's once again every excuse in the book to mitigate AEW's performances and then not offering WWE the same excuses. Obviously, of course, this doesn't include HBO Max numbers, but this video isn't about the ratings. The fall of the wrestling ratings over these past few weeks across the board is its own bizarre story that I may address in a future video, because I think by now we've got a rough idea of what's happening and why there's practically like a 20-30% drop across all professional wrestling viewership, including, AEW, WWE. They're all hit just as badly, practically. But it's more a fact of Meltzer sort of constantly defending AEW's performances or decisions, but then won't take up for WWE in the same way, or he will make WWE out to be the bad guy at every turn when there's a AEW WWE conflict. And trust me, WWE does enough bad stuff that they do not need Dave Meltzer's biased takes to let their own bad decisions or whatnot stand out on their own. Once again, it's the constant cheerleading with AEW that I find beyond infuriating. And once again, I believe ultimately is going to turn fans away from the product. I think it already has. And they just don't need this anymore. But here's where we get back to Rusev here. Meltzer's stance also stretches with AEW stories, including the Rusev one. Now, just so you know, I'll reference it several times in the future, but just so you know, Rusev left AEW under a bit of a cloud. He hadn't wrestled there for like 18 months yet, was stuck at home on his Twitch streams or whatever it might be. And according to a recent quote from Rusev, he was Miro in AEW, by the way, but a recent quote from Rusev has suggested that he didn't want it to go down that way, but Dave Meltzer is listening to Tony Khan's version of events, and he's, propagating that version of events as well. So there's very much a conflict here. So, to give another example of Dave Meltzer, a couple of days ago on Twitter, he was arguing with every single fan that he hasn't blocked, I guess, about how the Young Bucks were completely innocent bystanders and it was all that nefarious CM Punk causing issues in AEW and Kenny Omega. It wasn't Kenny Omega. It was all CM Punk's fault, basically. That whole situation where, of course, it's always going to be shades of grey, that kind of thing. But no, he was sticking up for the Young Bucks because, they called their finisher the Meltzer Driver and he's best friends with him. Anyway, once again, you can't take what he says seriously when it comes to AEW because you have to see where he's coming from and who's feeding him the information. That's being said, let's get to Rusev's comments regarding his supposed refusal to lose matches in AEW, which ended up seeing him sat at home for 16 months or 18 months, whatever it was, before he was eventually released. In the past 5 years while working for AEW, I have had 20 or 30 matches. I think it was like 36, wasn't it? Back in the day, during his first WWE run, I had 30 matches in 30 days, Rusev said. The dead time sticks out the most. We only have this body and age for so long. We can't do this job forever, so we must take advantage of it while we're young. I sit on the sidelines for so long, unable to do what I love, which is performing for people in professional wrestling. Doesn't particularly sound like he wanted to stay at home from that quote. Kind of flies into the face of what Tony Khan and therefore his avatar Dave Meltzer are saying. Now let's get to Dave Meltzer's comments in the Wrestling Observer from this past Friday once again. Is that here? No, I'm just going to read it. It felt like Rusev spent the most of that time either injured or not used because of creative differences, largely based on not wanting to lose. He had 36 matches in 5 years, and in hindsight, Tony Khan probably paid him more for less than anyone in the history of AEW. Since returning to WWE, he's had 25 matches. Now, you read that down, you think, that damn Rusev, that damn Miro, standing up for his business or, getting involved with the creative or trying to hash things out, and they just couldn't make it happen, and it's all because of Rusev, and that's why Tony Khan had to not suspend him, but send him home and pay him, but not ship him off to TV, so basically gets paid to do nothing for 18 months. That's maybe, if you read that line or those few lines, what you might come away with at first glance. What I'm saying is that Meltzer apparently doesn't realise what a giant self-own this is. Or really, because basically him and Tony Khan are the same person now. This is self-own for Tony Khan. What I'm now getting out of this is that Rusev isn't a terrible person, is that Tony Khan is an ineffectual boss. That's what I'm getting out of this. So, and it just seems to be burying Tony Khan through this. So once again, Rusev heads back to WWE. He clearly has absolutely no problem losing to Penta or Dominic Mysterio or Sheamus or whoever it might be. He has lost a lot of matches since returning. He's won some as well, of course. He's just somewhere in the middle of the pack. Now, it's not an argument of whether his return to WWE has been successful or not. It's not really been enough time. He's only been there about 3.5 months or so, maybe getting close to 4. But, he's not lighting the world on fire. He's just somewhere in the middle of the card at the moment, and he's proven to be one of a triple threat with Dom and Penta these last few weeks in this most recent feud. But, he's showing up to work. He's willing to lose. He's willing to lose to basically anybody. He's seeming to be very malleable and happy to be there and everything. He's getting paid pretty well, I suspect. And once again, he's lost twice as many matches already in 25 matches that he did in 36 matches in AEW over the course of 5 years. And also, here's another thing. He's already wrestled 25 matches in just over 3 months for WWE as well. There's clearly an issue here. And in my mind, Rusev might not be making things easy, but it's not the Rusev issue here. This is a AEW Tony Khan issue. If you can't get somebody to work 25 matches in a year, let alone 36 matches in 5 years, I mean, it's nuts. Anyway, once again, here's another quote. I do have it here, actually. Yes, so I'm just going to show it. Here we go. That was the most ill-spent money Tony Khan probably ever did, or among them, I shouldn't say the most, but among them, was that one, because it's like this guy wouldn't do anything in AEW, then he goes to WWE and he's putting over Dominic Mysterio, you know? He wouldn't put over guys twice as good as Dominic in AEW. We're going to get to that in 1 second, but once again, Dave Meltzer a few months ago in the newsletter wrote, once Rusev got down and serious in AEW, he had good matches and it was going well, and then he got hurt, and then he and Tony Khan just couldn't agree on stuff and just didn't do anything. There really wasn't much to do with him, and he didn't want to lose before going back to WWE. Okay, what about this? Tony Khan is the boss. He controls who appears on television, evidently. Who wins, who loses, who goes over, and more importantly, who gets paid. Why is this even a negotiation? I am paying you to do a job. You have signed a contract, all finishes are final, etc. I am the person who chooses what happens. Now, there's nothing wrong with being headstrong as a pro wrestler and standing up for your own business, especially. It's smart as well, especially when you're an independent contractor. But at the end of the day, if everyone is at an impasse, there's two things that Rusev can realistically do. So Tony Khan wants you to do one thing. Miro, because he was Miro there, doesn't want to do it. Right, you've got two things. Either cooperate or don't cooperate. So either in the ring or in the back as far as not cooperating. So if Miro doesn't cooperate, you can just suspend him without pay, because that would be, a serious breach of his contractual terms, I suspect. Or fire him for just cause and then cost him a year or even years because he's, not doing what you're asking of him, and that becomes a serious breach. I mean, we've just seen that with the Andrade situation. I don't know, obviously, if AEW contracts have that clause like WWE contracts do, but he and Tony Khan and everyone else in AEW obviously had no idea what that situation was between Andrade and WWE, and now Andrade's career and bank account is going to suffer greatly for not cooperating with WWE or not fully understanding the terms of the contract. So if Rusev got injured and then recovered and then was sat at home for 18 months or whatever it was waiting for the call, that tells me that Tony Khan is not handling the negotiations properly here. And that isn't the best way to run a professional wrestling company, in my opinion. If there is a disagreement, try and hash it out. If there is no middle ground reached, then at some point you're paying this guy. It's got to be it's my way or the highway. You will come in, you will wrestle so-and-so. I think his last match was with Andrade, or one of them anyway. It's his last feud, I think, in AEW. But I don't get this whole, they couldn't agree kind of thing, so he just had to sit at home and get him paid for 18 months while he's on his Twitch stream. It's just not how it should work, and I think it's the case of somebody with too much money who would rather bury his head in the sand, not deal with the problem, than deal with the problem and get the most out of your money and get the most out of your wrestlers. It's the same thing with Penta and Phoenix, and Mariah May and whoever else, and Aleister Black. Well, they've expressed an interest to go to WWE, so instead of getting anything out of these people who I'm paying, I'm just going to sit them at Britt Baker. Where's Britt Baker been for a year now, I think? It might have even been longer at this point. But it's just one of those things where I just think that is just not what you should be doing. It's ineffectual cost-wise. You're not getting anything out of the wrestlers you are paying, especially Rusev, who was gone for the longest amount of time, but Britt Baker is catching up. But anyway, with the two things that Dave Meltzer said there that I quoted before, all I'm seeing is instead of painting Rusev as a bad person or a bad employee, it just sounds like Tony Khan is a completely ineffectual leader, which is, of course, not what Dave Meltzer's trying to get out there, but he doesn't realise that that's exactly what he's just said. Now, I'm sure Meltzer will continue to complain about all those horrible former AEW wrestlers who want to head to WWE for, the added exposure in a lot of cases, probably more money as well. And I know Tony pays well, but ultimately all these guys have to look out for themselves, and it's up to the owners and the bosses to get the most out of them. Now, Rusev, I read the quote a bit early there. It seems content to lose to Dirty Dominic Mysterio on television week after week. So it's telling me that he's quite easy to work with. But once again, I've just got to get to this quote once again. Putting over Dominic Mysterio, he wouldn't put over guys twice as good as Dominic in AEW. Who in AEW is twice as good as Dominic Mysterio at that point? When you factor in everything from, the performances, he's not going after your beloved 5 stars kind of thing, or 7 stars, whatever the stupid scale is now, because that's not what wrestling's all about. It's all about the reactions, it's all about who's tuning in to see you, it's about the performances and the entertainment value and the marketability as well. Who in AEW, a very select few, are as good as or better than Dominic Mysterio? So who are these magical twice as good people that Rusev weren't putting over, but he's putting over Dominic Mysterio? And I'm not just saying that in AEW as well. WWE, there are very, very few people as good or better than Dominic Mysterio. I'm a big fan of him, and for good reason. You see the cheers he gets. Like, he's doing his best to be a heel, and they're cheering him as well. Even in AAA, he was against Vikingo recently. He was getting so many cheers. Now, that is all well and good for, the right-thinking wrestling fan. Well, who's better than Dominic Mysterio? It's a short list, unless good means, or twice as good means, well, they can do twice as many flips. That's the only way I can see that argument go, well, why didn't you put over this guy? Look at all the flips he can do. Anyway, so, and here's the other thing. Here's what really chaps Dave Meltzer's ass and Tony Khan's, is that Rusev, along with other people, and I think Dutch has said this, an old example, people like Booker T when they went to TNA. Dutch Mantell always said, because he was Booker at the time, you could always tell with Booker T that he always had one eye on WWE to go back to WWE. And I sort of think, well, that's fine. Once again, you're an independent contractor. You have to look after your own business as well. But there's always a bit of give and take. I'm sure with Rusev, there was always going to be a little give and take. Unless he just folded his arms and said, I will not do anything you ask unless it's winning the world title. Which I doubt it went like that. Especially considering how many times and how many people and who he's lost to in WWE currently. I'm suspecting this is very, very much AEW PR overload, trying to make Rusev look as bad as humanly possible, along with these accusations that it was only him that was causing the issues, why he wasn't in AEW winning or losing or whatever it was, and also that he's doing terribly in WWE, which Dave Meltzer points out every single week, or hinting towards that at the very least. So once again, Dave Meltzer's comments actually highlight this fact that actually it's a problem with Tony Khan as much as anyone else, if not more. But the problem with Dave Meltzer is that was the exact opposite point he was trying to make. Now, that's my opinion. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you for the next video.